All right. I'm not sure if it started streaming yet, but if you're tuning in to today's Facebook live lesson, welcome. And thank you. Before I begin, thank you to all those who have written to me asking me to do another writing task lesson, but this time on task 1, because based on the messages that you've given me, a lot of you have been voicing your frustration as to why you are stuck at the same level, at the same band score again and again and again. And so this time I've decided to do a compilation of 5 reasons why you are stuck at band 6. So if you're able to relate to some of the reasons here, hopefully the strategies and the lesson for today will help you move forward with your IELTS band score. Okay, so for those of you who've just tuned in, welcome. And if it's your first time tuning in, this I think is my 4th lesson at on Facebook Live. So if you want to check out the other videos, feel free to take a look at the videos section of my Facebook page. And if you're not able to see the video in its entirety, there's always the YouTube videos to check out, because what happens after the Facebook Live session is I upload all my videos onto YouTube for everyone to see. Okay, so if you feel that you've missed some of the lessons that I've done here, don't despair. You can watch them all on YouTube. Okay, so let's get started. What we're going to be doing today is, by the end of this lesson, hopefully you'll be able to understand the importance of using a clear introduction when summarizing data. And also we're going to look at how to be selective about the information that you include. Okay, so let's find out the 5 reasons why you keep getting stuck at band 6. One of the reasons could be that you are missing an overview. Okay, one of the first things that examiners look for in a piece of writing, particularly in task 1 here, is an overview. Okay, if you don't know what an overview is, basically it's a very, very short paragraph, maybe a one-liner, that informs the reader the most important things about the chart, okay, or the graph, or the table, or the map, whatever that's given to you. So an overview is a summary. What it means is that it's a summary. So a summary should not contain any specific data. So avoid putting in numbers or figures into your overview. And what you should do instead is to describe the main features very generally. Okay? Leave all the details to the body of the writing, but an overview should just contain a summary of what you see of the trends in the graph or the table or the map or the diagram that's given to you. Now, some people prefer to write an overview at the end of their task 1, which is fine, because as long as you have an overview, you'll be okay. However, I do not recommend this, because the IELTS test is just as much a test of your time management skills as it is your language skills. So if you're not very good at time management, and if you feel that you need to leave your overview to the end, that could be a very dangerous thing to do. Because once you look up and see that you're running out of time, you start to panic. And when people panic, they tend to forget. Okay, so my advice to all first-time candidates out there, or even seasoned candidates, try to put your overview at the beginning of your writing. Get it out of the way. So when you are pressed for time, you will know that it's already written there at the beginning of your writing, and you don't have to, um, start shaking nervously, start writing your overview or your summary at the end of your writing. So get the important stuff out of the way first, and do this at the beginning of your test, of your task one. The reason why this, I feel, is the most important thing that you need to do is that if you are missing an overview, let's take a look at what the public descriptor here shows. Now, this is more or less what your examiner looks at as they mark your paper. Now, if you look at this public descriptor, what differentiates between Band 5 and Band 6 is that in Band 5, if you do not have a clear overview, that's where you'll be stuck at Band 5. You can't move on to Band 6. Okay? Band 6, a Band 6 piece of writing has an overview with information appropriately selected. Okay? So if you have not got an overview on your in your writing, then it may be that you have been given a Band 5 instead of a Band 6. Okay, so be very careful, because this is part of your assessment, and it is in your assessment criteria. Now, reason number 2 is the tendency for candidates to include everything in their writing. Absolutely everything. So an inexperienced candidate tends to look at the task or the table or the chart or the diagram and try to squeeze in all of the information at once in their writing. Try not to do this, because if you look at the question paper, every single question paper that you're given for task 1 says that you have to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features. So we're going to take a look at some example topics later. But there is a reason why the question paper has that sentence, and most candidates tend to ignore that. They just tend to glaze over it and then just write what they want to write, not what their examiner wants them to write. So the sentence is there for a purpose. It's not for decoration, mind you. Yeah, it's there for a purpose. And part of doing well in the IELTS test is to make sure that you understand what you're asked to do, what you're required to do, and to be able to follow those instructions. If you don't follow instructions to the letter, you will not do well in the test at all. Okay, so summarize means that you only need to mention the important points, the main points, or in the sentence itself it says the main features. So avoid the temptation of writing about every single piece of data that you see. Okay, if you do that, your writing will look really disorganized, and you'll find that in the process of trying to squeeze everything in, you'll run out of time, and if you start to do writing task 1 first, you'll find that you'll run past your 20-minute time limit, and you don't have enough time to complete task 2. Okay, so remember, you need to be selective. Okay, and one of the skills that you need to have in writing task 1 is prioritizing. Okay, what you need to do is, as soon as you receive your question paper, look at if you're given figures, try to do this. Look at the biggest numbers, look at the smallest numbers, and look at any numbers that are similar to each other, and see what sort of pattern you can come up with to relate to what you're going to describe. Okay, so this is one way of prioritizing. Excuse me. as soon as you get your question paper, don't just be, yeah, try not to be confused over, a lot of numbers that are given to you. Sometimes you're given a graph that's just full of numbers. What you need to do is to make sure that you can pick out the biggest numbers, the smallest numbers, and any numbers that are similar to each other. And then try to talk about it, try to describe it in relation to what's being described in the graph. Okay, next problem is candidates just overanalyzing the question. Okay, most of the time IELTS questions are very simple, and in my experience tutoring IELTS candidates, a lot of them tend to overcomplicate things when, you know, for example, your examiner is just asking you for a cup of tea. If they're asking you for a cup of tea, give them a cup of tea. Don't give them, a whole banquet of coffees and juices and whatever. If that's what they want, give them what they want. Don't overanalyze things. It's all very straightforward. And this is especially true of task 2, I notice. Try not to overcomplicate things by overanalyzing the questions. Okay, sometimes the questions are just so straightforward that you don't even see it, which is quite a shame. We'll take a look at some examples of this later on, but yeah, this is one of the problems that candidates tend to face. What they do is they try to look too deeply into the graphs, when in fact the graphs are so simple. Okay, all you have to do is to try to spot general trends. Don't be distracted by detail. Okay, and just look at what you can talk about the graph in general terms. All right, so if you take a look at the assessment criteria again over here, the difference between band 6 and band 7 is that a band 6 candidate appropriately selects information. A band 7 candidate shows a very clear overview of main trends, differences, or stages. However, a band 5 candidate talks about detail mechanically. Just randomly talk about details without any clear purpose. Or sometimes there may be no data or numbers at all to support what they say. So be very careful about putting too much information in, overcomplicating things, and just focus on general trends. Okay. Disorganization. That's another problem. Okay, so make sure that you organize your ideas logically. What tends to happen in IELTS writing is that candidates, once they receive their question paper, they, start immediately putting pencil to paper, which is not a good idea. What you should do is use the first 5 minutes to think about how you are going to organize your answer. Which information goes in the second paragraph? Which information goes in the third paragraph? If you're given a table, how are you going to divide that table? Are you going to divide that table in paragraphs by country or by year? So try to think about how you're going to group your information together with different paragraphs. Okay, so again, we'll look at some examples of how to do this later on. And finally, incorrect information. This is quite a shame because incorrect data usually comes from two things. First reason, candidates do not check their work at the end. And so they, instead of saying 75%, they say 85% or something like that. So little things like these require some sort of checking at the end to see that you have not relayed information incorrectly. And another reason why candidates tend to give incorrect information is because of their language skills. Because some people, they try to use grammar or vocabulary that they're not very sure about. Okay, so if you use slightly over, make sure it means exactly that. It's slightly over 10%. If you say population figures were 10% higher, make sure that it means exactly 10% higher, not over 10% higher, and so on. So remember to choose your vocabulary carefully, because there is a difference, in how you choose your words to describe your data. Okay, so these basically are the 5 main reasons why you are stuck at band 6. So if you can relate to any of these, try to stay tuned for the rest of the lesson to see how you can overcome this immediately if possible. Now, let's take a look at how to get yourself unstuck in this situation. Now, firstly, make sure that you include a summary of the trend. Remember what I told you before. Try to put your overview at the beginning of your writing, not at the end. Do not leave anything to the last minute. It always is the case with IELTS candidates. People tend to ask me for help at the last minute, or they tend to leave the best part to the last minute. I don't understand this concept. You need to make sure that you get the important stuff out of the way so that you can focus on the less important things later on. So prioritizing is extremely important in IELTS writing. Okay, so make sure that you try to include a summary. Doesn't matter where, it could be at the end, it could be at the beginning, but make sure that there is one in your writing. Also, make sure that you choose your information carefully. Like I said, avoid the temptation of writing about every single piece of information out there that's given to you, because otherwise you'll end up recounting detail mechanically. Okay, so if you look at band 5 here, this is what I mean. If you talk about every single piece of information, you'll end up recounting detail mechanically, and so you'll get a band 5 rather than a band 6. Okay, so be wise about that. What you need to do is to avoid overcomplicating the task. This can happen if you have been doing like 10 writing tasks back to back over and over again. If you feel that you need to take a break when you do your writing practice, go and have a cup of coffee, take a walk, whatever, take a nap. When you come back to the question, you will probably see it in a different perspective, because the task questions are usually very, very straightforward. Okay, there's no hidden meaning. You don't need to read between the lines. It just says what it means. Okay, so you do not need to do a text analysis of the task question and waste time doing that. So if it asks you for X, give them X. If it asks you for Y, give them Y. So don't overcomplicate things. Another thing that you need to do is to make sure that you use the first 5 minutes to think about how you're going to organize your answer. Now, in reality, you don't actually have 20 minutes to write your description. You actually only have 10 minutes, because when you practice writing, this is how you should be dividing your time. You should take 5 minutes to plan. That means you need to think about how you're going to sort out the information on paper, and then you have 10 minutes to write and do not underestimate the importance of checking your information. So this is how you should be allocating your time. Okay, 5 minutes, look at your figures, look at your diagram very carefully. Think about how you're going to organize that information, and then write down that information, and then go over your writing to see if you have given any incorrect information. Check your information. That's strategy number 5. Okay, make sure that you devote your time in the last 5 minutes to check. So this is what you need to be doing. When you practice, remember, give yourself 10 minutes to write, because a lot of people are very disorganized with their time. If you're used to practicing with a timer in front of you, 5 minutes alarm, you know, for you to start writing, 10 minutes alarm for you to start checking your work, then in the real test, you will not be as flustered as some people who do not know how to manage their time properly. Okay? So if you're not already doing this now, please do so. As I've mentioned, it's just as much a test of your time management skills as it is a test of your writing or language skills. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to look at some example charts, and we are going to take a look at how to write a clear introduction when we summarize our data, and how to choose the information, what information to include. Okay, so here I've got 4 illustrations. They show you a snapshot of British life early in the 21st century. Okay, so my first question to you is, I hope you have a pen and paper in front of you. It's always a good idea to make some notes as we go along. Which aspects of life does each illustration relate to? So let's take a look at illustration 1. What aspect of life does it talk about? If you say that it's about transport, you are absolutely right. Okay, if you can't see it, I'm not really sure how to make it bigger, but yeah, it is about transport. What about illustration number 2? What is it talking about? What does it refer to? Okay, if you say it's about housework, you are absolutely right as well. So it's about housework. Number 3, illustration 3. What aspect of life does it refer to? It refers to household size. Okay, the number of people in a household. And illustration number 4, it should be about participation in sport or physical activity. Okay. Now, one of the things that I've noticed about people who don't understand how to write charts is they tend to talk about them in terms of numbers. They don't talk about how people travel by cars, trains, or buses and coaches. They talk about 8 to 15, they talk about 45 to 64, but they don't relate to what the graph is actually about. It's about housework. Yeah, and sometimes I see scripts, you know, where candidates tend to write about 3 people, 4 people, 5 people. Yeah, what does this mean? It means that there are 5 people living in a household, and so on. So don't be blinded by just numbers. Make sure that you relate your information to what it's actually about. So the first graph is basically about people traveling by car, by buses and coaches. Okay, don't just say in 1992 there were transport remained at 100. What do you mean transport remained by 100? It's basically about people traveling by buses and coaches and so on. Okay, so don't get lost in the figures, make sure that you clearly relate what you mean here, what the graphs refer back to. Okay, now what comparisons does each of these illustrations make? So if you look at illustration number 1, they are comparing different modes of transport, which are train, bus and car. Graph number 2 compares the difference between time spent on household tasks by men and women of different ages. Yeah? So, as simple as that. Graph 3, it compares relative numbers of households of different sizes from 1 person to 6 or more. So how many people in each household. And 4, it compares different people at different ages participating in sport or physical activity. All right, so that's what it's about. Okay, so what you need to do in the first few seconds of getting your graph is to understand what it's about, like what I've done with you here. Okay, the first topic is about transport and what does it compare. So what is it about? What does it compare? These are the 2 things that you need to answer in the first 5 seconds of getting, or in the first 10 seconds of getting your question paper. So you've got to learn to train your eyes to understand what these pictures actually mean. Okay, now my next question is, which ones are based on totals? Which ones are based on proportions? Which ones are based on percentages? And which ones are based on averages? And how do we know this? Okay, so let's take a look back at the graph. The one that's based on totals is graph number 1, because you can see that the vertical axis, it's marked with billions of passenger kilometers. Okay, on the vertical axis. I don't know if you can see me pointing there, but it refers to the total of billions of passenger kilometers. Proportions is obviously illustration 3, because a pie chart like this shows the proportion of the total for each group illustrated. Okay, so a pie chart normally shows you proportions. Yeah, proportion of this, proportion of that, and so on. Now, percentages, you can find that in chart number 4. So you can see from the vertical axis, it's marked with percentages. It's not total. Okay, make sure that you understand the difference between total and percentages. They both have numbers, but one talks about totals and one talks about percentages. And finally, averages. Now, averages, you can find them in 2 charts. Chart number 2 and chart number 4. You can see that the figures in these charts show averages of each age group listed, because an age range is given in each case. So you can see that this is the age ranges for chart number 2 and chart number 4. So the average age of people who participate in sport or physical activity, or people who do housework. Okie dokie. All right. So you need to make sure that you understand what the numbers represent as well. So we've looked at what each chart is about, what they compare, what the numbers represent, and this time, what point in time or period does each illustration relate to? Okay. what point in time or what point in or what period does each illustration relate to? So if you look at chart 1, the time period is between 1952 to 2002. You can see that from the horizontal axis. Okay. Chart number 2 is a period of 1 year, which is 2000 to 2001, as you can see here at the top. Chart number 3 is the year 2003, as you can see there. And chart number 4, again, it's 1 year, 2000 and 2001, as represented there. Okay, so we have looked at 4 things. Let's summarize what we've looked at. So this is something that you should understand, that you should try to do in the first few seconds of receiving your question paper. Okay, what the chart is about. Secondly, what do they compare? Thirdly, what the numbers represent. And fourthly, what period of time are we looking at here? Okay, so that's what you need to work out in the first few seconds of getting your question paper. All right, let's move on to. Okay, hold on a second. Let me just try to move the page. Okay, right. So here I've got a statement. I'll give you a couple of seconds to read through that and try to understand what it's saying. Okay, so this, which illustration does this relate to? Which do you think? Let's go back to the earlier illustrations here, the 4 charts. Okay, so if you say that this is about chart number 2, then you are absolutely right. Okay, so this chart refers to, sorry, the statement refers to chart number 2. Let's take a look at the statement again. The chart shows the average number of hours spent per day on household tasks by both males and females of different age groups in the UK during the period 2000 to 2001. So obviously this talks about the second chart. So you can see that the information included here is the average number of hours per day. You can see the information that's included in the statement. Okay, average number of hours per day, which is the unit of measurement on the vertical axis of the illustration. So if you look back at the vertical axis of the illustration here, okay, so it refers to the average number of hours per day. And on household tasks, if you look at the statement again, on household tasks, okay, which is what the measurement relates to, and males and females of different age groups which are the groupings used on the horizontal axis. Yeah. And finally, in the UK, which is the place that's being referred to. Okay, so this is an appropriate way of stating accurately in your own words what the data shows, because it will clarify your thoughts and it will set the scene for your examiner or your reader. Okay, how do you think you can write your introduction for the rest of the charts? Let's look at number 1. Okay, let's go through number 1 here. Give you a few seconds. What can we say? Maybe something like, the graph shows the total number of kilometers per year. Yeah, the total number of kilometers per year. What else can we say? Traveled in Britain. The total number of kilometers per year traveled in Britain by 3 modes of transport between 1952 to 2002. How about that? Okay, shall I repeat that? You could say the graph shows the total number of kilometers per year traveled in Britain by 3 modes of transport. You can mention train, bus and car if you like, during the period 1952 to 2002. Now, number 3, chart number 3, how are we going to describe that? You could say the chart indicates the proportion, perhaps, the proportion of UK households consisting of differing numbers of people from 1 to 6 or more in 2003. Okay, shall I repeat that? You could say the chart indicates the proportion of UK households, yeah, consisting of differing numbers of people from 1 to 6 or more in 2003. What about chart number 4? How are we going to say that? How are we going to introduce this? You could say that the chart shows, because the numbers reveal an average, so we could say the chart shows the average number of UK citizens, yeah, of different age groups who participated in sport or physical activity between 2000 and 2001. Okay, shall I say that one more time? You could say the chart shows the average number of UK citizens of different age groups who participated in sport or physical activity in the period 2000 to 2001. If you'd like some examples, if you would like to see my answers written down, you can see that there. Okay, so this is the sentence for graph number 1, graph number 3 and graph number 4. So you can see that it talks about the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. This is what you should be focusing on in your introduction. You should focus on the total number of kilometers, which in this case would be the vertical axis, per year traveled in Britain. Okay, what does it show there? Okay, so the horizontal axis refers to during the period 1952 to 2002. Okay, the same for chart number 3. The chart indicates the proportion of UK households. I think this is a pie chart. So in this case, you talk about what the different colors are in the legend of the pie chart. Okay, let's go back to the pie chart. What the legend, this is what I mean by legend, what the legend means and what the how it relates to the title. Okay, the percentages, you can work on that later on. Or the proportion, you can work on that later on. That's what you need to do. So you could see that the introduction focuses on the vertical, horizontal axis, vertical, horizontal axis. This is what each of your introductions should have. Your overview, however, should be this part of your graph. So it could either show that it's going up, or that it's going down, or that it's flat, consistent, or that it fluctuates, and so on. So the marks in red is what you should be putting in your overview. The lines in blue, the vertical and horizontal axis, should be the ones that you should put in your introduction. Okay, so far so good, I hope. I hope that differentiates between introduction and overview. Okay, I think we're quickly running out of time here, so let's move on to Okay, so let's take a look at the trends now. In other words, the overview. How are we going to talk about the overview here? Let's go back to the 4 illustrations again. Oops. Let's just get rid of the annotations here. Okay, now if you look at chart number 1, what does it tell you about the British attitude to the aspects of home? What is their attitude to home? Sorry, not about chart number 1. So this should be I think chart number 2, I think. What is the British attitude to the home? So we could see from chart number 2 that men, you can see from the colors between between blue and orange here, okay, in chart number 2, that men are not expected to share the housework with women 50-50. Simple as that. Yeah, that men are not expected to share the housework with women at 50-50. You can see that there is a big disparity here in this age group. What about their attitude to the family? So which graph talks about family? So that would be graph number 3. Okay, so we know that living alone, okay, from the different colors here, we can see that living alone rather than with the family is normal and acceptable. You can see that in red. 1 person, 2 people. You can see that it's that's a huge proportion over here. 1 person, 2 people. So living alone rather than with the family is normal and acceptable, and that large families are not very common. So the bigger your family is, the smaller the numbers become. Okay, what is the British attitude to transport? Let's talk about transport. Go back to chart number 1. It shows that people Okay. Basically, it shows that people travel more than they used to. How do we know this? Excuse me. People travel more than they used to because you can see that for cars, the numbers just kept going up and up and up. Yeah, and they travel many more miles by car than by other forms of transport. So that's what we know of the trend. What about their attitude to leisure? Let's take a look at leisure, which is the last chart, chart number 4. We can see that younger people, okay, that's between 8 to 15, younger people spend much more time on physical activities than older people. Okay, I can definitely relate to that. So yeah, so the older you get, the less physical activity you tend to do. So that's the trend. And this is what you should be mentioning in your overview. Okay, so what we've just discussed here are the trends. Okay, that men, for example, for chart number 2, that men are not expected to share the housework with women, 50-50. Chart number 3, that living alone is normal and acceptable. Big families are not very common. That's chart number 3. Chart number 1, the trend that you see here is that people travel more than they used to, and they travel many more miles by car. And chart number 4 is that younger people spend much more time on physical activities than older people. So these are the trends that you should be mentioning in your overview. Okay? Notice that I have not mentioned any numbers. Remember, numbers should be left to the body of your writing. If you want to talk about details, save them for the body of your writing, not the overview. Okay? All right. Now, what I'd like you to do is take a look at some of these statements here. Okay. I hope you can see them. Statement A to H. Okay, which of these statements do you think give important information about chart number 2? So we're looking at chart number 2 here, only number 2, about, if you remember, this is about housework. If you're watching this live, you can send me a message saying that you want me to go to the page on the graph. If you're watching this on video, you can always rewind the video to where the graphs are shown. So if you want me to change the page now, please let me know in the comment section. Okay, we'll just go through this together. Anyway, statement by statement. If we look at if you think that the best summary is statement E, I think that's good, because if you look at statement E, by the ages of 25 to 44, a clear pattern has emerged in which women spend approximately twice as much time on housework as men do, and this continues into middle age. This gives you a general statement of what the graph shows. Okay, so if you look at the graph again, let me just clear the annotations here. If you look at the graph again, okay, the statement by the ages of 25 to 44, a clear pattern has emerged in which women spend approximately twice as much time on housework as men do, and this continues into middle age. This would be a good summary. This would be a good overview. And if you take a look at maybe statement F, the chart indicates that women spend more time on household tasks in each age group. Is also a good overview. So E, I would say E and F are very good overviews to use because they give you the best general summary of the information in the chart. But if you look at B and A, they focus on main details. In the youngest age group, both sexes spend under 1 hour on household tasks, but the amount is more similar than in general. The length of time both sexes spend on housework increases as they get older. It's a bit vague, to be honest. Yeah. Doesn't tell you how much more time. Okay, and I think E and F provide a clearer picture that the difference between B and F is that you know that women spend more time in each age group. But for B, it just says that as you get older, you spend more time doing housework, but it doesn't really compare men and women. And A, I think, is too focused on detail. All right? So sentences C and G is they deal with minor details which are not really relevant to the main features. So if you look at sentence C, women between the ages of 25 and 44 spend over 4 hours per day on household tasks, blah, blah, blah. This, to me, is much better written in the body of the paragraph of the writing rather than in the overview. The same for G. Between the age groups 25 and 44, 45 and 64, increases by about half an hour. That could be left. That could be written in the body of the writing, not as an overview. So the problem here is that they contain minor details which are not relevant to the main features, which in this case not relevant to the overview. Sentence D, it repeats the information from sentence F in a less useful form. The columns in the chart are of different sizes. The ones relating to women are always larger than those related to men. Okay, very similar to F, but less helpful. Okay, so it doesn't sound as fluent as sentence F. The ones relating to women are always larger. What do you mean by larger? Do you mean that, so this is what I mean, you know, when you're caught up with numbers, you should always relate your information to the graph. In this case, women spend more time on household tasks in each age group. Okay, so make sure that you relate to what it's saying it refers to in the graph. And then we have sentence H, which is more of an opinion and not the information given in the chart. Men spend less time on housework because they do it more quickly. How do we know that men do housework more quickly? Is there any evidence in the chart that shows you that? Absolutely nothing there. So in IELTS writing task 1, do not assume or provide any opinion that is not evident in the graph. Okay. All right. I think we're running out of time very quickly. So basically, what you need to remember is a description should concentrate on your writing task one should concentrate on summarizing the information and make sure that you highlight the main details. Minor details and opinions do not need to be included. Okay, so remember that rule. Okay. If you look back at the statements, which of these would you include? And which one would you omit? So based on what I've just told you, that you should only concentrate on summarizing the information and not worry about minor details, you should include A, B, E, and F, I think. Let's just take a look. Okay. E and F definitely are better. But the ones that you should not include are C, D, G, and H. I think those are the ones that you should not have as your overview. Okay, but this would be the best answers there. Okay, I think we're gonna have to stop here for now. I didn't actually get to talk about some question papers and answers that I would like to compare with you today because we've run out of time. But perhaps in the next Facebook Live session we'll pick up from where we've left off. What you could do, I think, before your next lesson, your next Facebook lesson, now I'm planning to continue this anyway. What you could do is you could select 2 main points from each of the other illustrations. So here's your Facebook live homework for today. If it's the first, okay, let's go back to the graphs here. Okay, what you could do, we have already taken a look at graph number 2. So take a look back at graphs number 1, 3, and 4. Can you try to select 2 main points from each of the other illustrations and try to write a sentence to express these main points? Okay, I hope that was clear. So basically what I'd like you to do is just write 1 or 2 main points, an overview if you like, about graph 1, graph 3, and graph number 4. And then maybe in the next lesson we'll compare your sentences with mine and see how we get on. Okay, so I hope you have found today's lesson useful so far. We'll continue this, I think, in our next Facebook Live session, and we'll take a look at some example candidate writing and some example Band 9 answers. And we'll see how we can break through that ceiling of Band 6 that you keep getting stuck at. Okay, so thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Okay, have a good weekend, everybody. Bye bye for now.